The village was silent. Not a single sound could be heard, not even the rustling of leaves or the chirping of crickets. A thick fog hung in the air, muffling every sound. It was as if the village itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The houses were dark, shadows lurking in the mist. Each shadow seemed to have a life of its own, moving and shifting in the dense fog. It was a night for secrets, a night for whispers. The kind of night where the unknown felt just a step away, hidden in the fog. The air was cold and damp. It felt heavy, pressing down on everything and everyone. It clung to Mimumi's skin like a spider web, making her shiver uncontrollably. The fog seemed to twist and writhe, taking on strange shapes, shapes that watched her. Mimumi shivered, feeling eyes on her from every direction. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to find some comfort in its warmth. It did little to keep out the cold, or the fear that gnawed at her, making her heart race. She had a bad feeling about this night, a feeling that something was terribly wrong, lurking just beyond the veil of fog. Mimumi clutched the basket in her small hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she gripped the woven handle. Her mother had sent her out for herbs, feverweed for her grandmother, who had been bedridden for days with a high fever. It only grew in the meadow beyond the village, a place Mimumi rarely ventured to, especially alone. Mimumi didn't want to go. Not tonight. The fog scared her. It was thick and heavy, making it hard to see even a few feet ahead. But her grandmother was sick, her frail body shivering under layers of blankets. And her mother was worried, her eyes filled with concern and desperation. The path to the meadow was barely visible, shrouded in a dense, eerie mist. It wound its way through the fog like a silver ribbon, twisting and turning unpredictably. Mimumi walked slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The silence was unnerving. No crickets chirped, no owls hooted. The usual night sounds were absent, replaced by an oppressive stillness. Only the sound of her own breathing, each exhale visible in the cold night air, kept her company as she ventured deeper into the fog. The fog seemed to be getting thicker. It pressed in on Mimumi, suffocating her. She could barely see a few feet ahead. Then she heard it, a whisper. Her name, softly spoken, but unmistakable. Mimumi stopped dead in her tracks. She strained her ears, listening. There it was again, Mimumi. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. Someone was calling her, but who and why? A figure emerged from the fog, tall and slender, with long flowing hair. It drifted towards Mimumi, its feet not touching the ground. Mimumi gasped. She wanted to run, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. The figure stopped in front of her. Its face was pale and beautiful, but its eyes were filled with a deep sadness. "Mimumi," the figure whispered, "don't you recognize me?" Its voice was like the tinkling of wind chimes, beautiful but haunting. Mimumi shook her head slowly. She didn't recognize the figure, but there was something familiar about it, something that tugged at her heart. "I am your sister," the figure said. "Lilim." Memories flooded Mimumi's mind, flashes of a girl with laughing eyes and a mischievous smile. A girl who played with her in the meadow, a girl she had forgotten. "Lilim," Mimumi whispered. "I need your help, Mimumi," Lilim said. "I cannot find peace, not until you remember." The fog began to dissipate, slowly revealing the world around Mimumi. The thick, mysterious mist that had enveloped the meadow all night was now lifting, unveiling the beauty of the landscape. The first rays of dawn were breaking through the darkness, casting a golden hue over the meadow. Mimumi looked around, her eyes adjusting to the soft light of the early morning. She was standing in the meadow, a place she had visited many times before. But something was different this time. There was an air of solemnity that she couldn't quite place. There, in the center of the meadow, was a small gravestone. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Standing alone amidst the tall grass and wildflowers, it was old and weathered, covered in moss and lichen. The stone had clearly been there for many years, enduring the elements and the passage of time. But Mimumi could still make out the name etched into the stone. Lilim. The letters, though worn, were still legible, a testament to the person they commemorated. Mimumi sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She remembered her sister, she remembered her laughter, her kindness, and the way she used to light up a room with her presence. And she remembered her death. Lilim was gone, taken too soon by a cruel twist of fate. The pain of that loss was still fresh, even after all these years. But she would never be forgotten. Not while Mimumi lived. She vowed to keep her sister's memory alive, to honor her in every way she could. Lilim's spirit would live on in her heart forever.